1971 didn't whisper, it bled. While the world was still burning from Vietnam, civil unrest, and broken dreams, R&B artists stopped chasing hits and started telling the truth. That year, soul music didn't just play through speakers. It lived in the chest. Love, loss, loneliness, rage, grief. Nothing was hidden. These are the top 10 most emotional R&B songs of 1971. Records that didn't just make you feel something. They made you remember something you never had the words for. Number 10, The Chai Lights. Have You Seen Her? 1971. Eugene Record didn't scream the pain. He talked it. He walked right up to the mic and just started speaking, the way a broken man talks to himself late at night when no one is listening. Have You Seen Her? Was born from Record's real-life heartbreak, the collapse of his marriage to his high school sweetheart, Sandra Scott. He'd had the melody locked in his head for years, a quiet hook and a question he couldn't stop asking. But the song almost never got recorded. The label thought it was too long at 5 minutes, too slow, too unconventional. It wasn't until Isaac Hayes proved on Hot Buttered Soul that long spoken word R&B could move people that producer Carl Davis finally gave it a shot. Brunswick released 3 other singles first, not ignoring it entirely, until R&B radio stations started playing the album cut on their own. The public demanded it as a single. When it finally hit, Have You Seen Her went to number 1 on the R&B chart. 1 million copies sold. And to this day, Eugene Record's gentle, trembling voice, asking that simple, devastating question, remains one of the most quietly heartbreaking moments in soul music history. Number 9, Gladys Knight and the Pips. If I Were Your Woman, 1971.
You'd have no other woman.
Gladys Knight didn't want to sing it. When songwriters Pam Sawyer and Gloria Jones brought the song to Motown, the lyrical sentiment felt almost too bold, too confrontational for a woman to say out loud. Norman Whitfield, who was producing the Pips at the time, had to push her to record it. She finally relented and delivered one of the most spine-chilling vocal performances of her career. If I Were Your Woman wasn't a schoolgirl crush or a polite plea. It was the voice of a grown woman, patient, devoted, and finally done pretending. The song was originally written for other Motown artists, including a version the Supremes would record but never release until 2006. Gladys Knight took it and made it hers within seconds of opening her mouth. It shot to number 1 on the R&B chart in January 1971 and peaked at number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100. It earned 2 Grammy nominations. And when Gladys sang those words, she wasn't just performing, she was speaking for every woman who ever stayed quiet one moment too long. Number 8, The Temptations. Just My Imagination, Running Away With Me, 1971.
My window, I watch her as she passes.
The Temptations recorded this song while falling apart. Eddie Kendricks, the man behind that fragile, featherlight falsetto, had already made up his mind to leave the group. The tensions between him and Otis Williams had reached their breaking point. Recording sessions went through the night, nerves frayed, the air thick with everything unsaid. Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong had written the song in 1969, but held it back. When they finally brought it to the studio, Kendricks stayed behind after the rest of the group went home, alone in that quiet room, and recorded his lead vocal by himself. Otis Williams later described what came out of that session as wonderful, sweet, tender, sincere. By the time Just My Imagination hit number 1 on both the pop and R&B charts in April 1971, becoming the Temptations' 3rd pop chart topper, Kendricks had already signed his solo deal. He never sang lead with them again. Paul Williams, who sang the Aching Bridge, Every Night on My Knees I Pray, was fighting sickle cell anemia and alcohol addiction that would consume him. He passed away just 2 years later. That recording session was quietly the end of an era. and the song they left behind still sounds like a dream you can almost touch. Number 7, Al Green. Tired of Being Alone, 1971. Al Green wrote this song in 30 minutes in 1968, the morning after a show in Detroit, when his girlfriend had left him alone in their apartment again. Walked out, left the key behind. He was raw. He was furious. He flung open the windows of his apartment in a snowstorm, let the cold pour in, grabbed a pencil and wrote, "I'm so tired of being alone," before his hands could stop shaking. He tried to get it recorded for his 1969 album, but technical problems in the studio shut it down. Producer Willie Mitchell shelved it. Green kept fighting for it. When they finally re-recorded it in 1971, Mitchell coached Green to sing softer, to pull back and let the vulnerability breathe. Mitchell told the Chicago Tribune, "We started coming up with jazz chords, pretty music on top and heavy on the bottom, and it just clicked." It became Green's first major hit, going gold with over 1 million copies sold. It launched a streak of 7 consecutive gold singles. But behind all that smooth Memphis production was something real. A man who had been genuinely alone, genuinely hurting, asking anyone who would listen for something as simple as love. Number 6, Bill Withers. Ain't No Sunshine, 1971.
And when she's gone.
Bill Withers was 31 years old, working at an aircraft factory building toilet seats for Boeing 747s when he wrote this song. He had no record deal. He had no certainty he'd ever be heard. He wrote songs after work on scraps of paper, inspired by a 1962 film called Days of Wine and Roses, a story of 2 alcoholics who kept going back to each other, even as they destroyed each other. He understood that feeling. Sometimes you miss what was never good for you. He walked into the studio like a man who'd wandered in by accident, surrounded by legends. Booker T. Jones on keys, Stephen Stills on guitar, Donald Duck Dunn on bass. When the song reached the bridge, Withers hadn't written any lyrics yet, so he just kept repeating, "I know, I know, I know," 26 times, intending to fill it in later. The musicians told him to leave it. He did. That accidental loop became the most famous moment in the song. Ain't No Sunshine was originally buried as the B-side to another track. Radio DJs flipped it over and played it instead. It climbed to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. Won the Grammy for Best R&B Song. When Withers left the factory for good, his record label gave him a golden toilet seat to commemorate where it all started. He went into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2015. Number 5, Aretha Franklin. Bridge Over Troubled Water, 1971. Simon and Garfunkel's song had already won 5 Grammys and topped the charts when Aretha Franklin decided it needed to go somewhere it had never been, to church. She recorded her version in the summer of 1970, but what the world remembers is what happened on March 5th, 1971, at the Fillmore West in San Francisco. Aretha was the first black woman ever to headline that venue. The crowd was mostly white hippies, an audience she had never performed for and wasn't sure she'd connect with. Producer Jerry Wexler had specifically chosen San Francisco to help cross her over into mainstream audiences. She walked out with King Curtis and the Kingpins, Billy Preston on organ, the Memphis Horns, and the Sweethearts of Soul at her back. When she sat at the piano and started playing, the room went still. She didn't sing the song, she preached it. She added her own gospel intro, called out to Billy Preston mid-performance, and lifted the melody into something the original version had never attempted. Paul Simon would later say it was the greatest cover he ever heard of his own song. That performance was captured on the live album, Aretha Live at Fillmore West. 54 years later, those 8 minutes remain one of the greatest moments in American music history. Number 4, Donny Hathaway. A Song for You, 1971. Leon Russell wrote this song in about 10 minutes in 1970 with Frank Sinatra in mind. But when Donny Hathaway recorded it for his second album that same year, something happened that no one fully expected. The original began to feel like the cover.
We're alone now, and I'm
Hathaway brought his full gospel training, his deep harmonic understanding, and something unquantifiable, a kind of ancient sadness that lived permanently in his voice. R.F. Martin arranged the orchestral strings and woodwind parts around him, delicate flutes trembling beneath a vocal that sounded like someone confessing at the altar rather than performing on a stage. His live performances of the song were described by audiences as creating a near-religious experience.
listen to the melody.
Donny Hathaway was brilliant and deeply troubled. He battled severe paranoid schizophrenia throughout his career, and the weight of that illness was written into every note he ever sang. He died on January 13th, 1979, having fallen from the 15th floor of a New York hotel. He was 33 years old. Amy Winehouse, who called him her all-time favorite artist, recorded her own version of this song just months before her own death. He had something in him, she said in a private recording. He couldn't contain it. Neither could this song.
Now I'm so much better.
Number 3, The Persuaders. Thin Line Between Love and Hate, 1971.
Let me hang up your coat.
This was The Persuaders' very first single. They had just signed to Atlantic Records. Songwriters Richard and Robert Poindexter brought them a story, the kind that felt dangerous and true. A man who keeps coming home at 5 in the morning to a patient, devoted woman who never raises her voice, never questions him, always has something warm waiting, and then one night, the man wakes up in a hospital, bandaged from foot to head.
Keep me quiet. She might be holding something inside.
The song's brilliance wasn't in the violence. It was in the slow, terrible patience that preceded it. Lead singer Douglas "Smokey" Scott delivered it without melodrama, almost calmly, which made the ending hit like a wall. It topped the Billboard R&B chart for 2 weeks in late 1971 and went gold with over 1 million copies sold. It introduced a phrase, thin line between love and hate, that entered the permanent American vocabulary. Tragically, the group's success was shadowed almost immediately. Shortly after the record's release, member Charles Stodgill fell ill and died. They never matched this song's commercial peak again, but the Pretenders covered it in 1984. Annie Lennox covered it, and every version asked the same question the original did: how long can someone absorb pain before it turns into something else entirely? Number 2, Sly and the Family Stone, Family Affair, 1971.
How do you just love to burn? You know the type. Hey!
By 1971, Sly Stone was disappearing. Cocaine and PCP had consumed his days. He'd surrounded himself with gangsters and bodyguards. The band that had once been America's most joyful, integrationist soul group, a radical multicultural experiment built on shared love, had fractured from the inside. Drummer Greg Errico had left. Larry Graham was on his way out. The group that made Woodstock famous was unraveling.
Thank you. Somebody that just loves to learn.
Sly recorded Family Affair almost entirely alone in his Bel Air home, filling every instrument track himself. Because he had no drummer, he programmed a primitive beatbox, making this the first #1 single in history to feature a drum machine. His sister Rose sang the refrain. Billy Preston played the electric piano. Bobby Womack played guitar. Asked later what instruments he'd played on the track, Sly said, "I've forgotten, man, whatever was left." The label didn't even want to release it as a single. His manager and Epic Records had to convince him. When they did, it went to #1 for 3 weeks on the Billboard, hot 105 weeks on the R&B chart. It was the biggest hit of Sly and the Family Stone's career, and it sounded like exactly what it was. A man barely holding together, singing about what happens when the people closest to you are the ones pulling you apart.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
#1, Marvin Gaye, Mercy, Mercy Me, The Ecology, 1971. Marvin Gaye had already fought Berry Gordy to release What's Going On. He'd gone on strike, refused to record another note, and forced Motown's hand. When that song exploded, selling over 200,000 copies in the first week, Gordy demanded an entire album by the end of March. What Marvin delivered included something no one expected: a song about the environment in 1971, before the public even had a full vocabulary for what he was describing. Mercy, Mercy Me, The Ecology, arrived as the second single from What's Going On in June 1971. Marvin played piano on the track himself. Paul Reiser and David Van de Pitt conducted the strings. Wild Bill Moore's saxophone solo opened the song with a grief so specific it sounded like the earth itself exhaling. When the lyrics talked about poison in the wind, oil wasted on the ocean, radiation underground, animals dying nearby, music critic Nelson George would later call it a song about environmental racism, written at a time when almost no mainstream artist was singing about anything like it. It hit #1 on the R&B chart for 2 weeks and peaked at #4 on the Billboard Hot 100. It made Marvin Gaye the first male solo artist ever to place 3 top 10 singles from a single album on the Hot 100. And more than 50 years later, it remains the most quietly devastating record of 1971. Not because it told you the world was broken, but because it mourned it the way you mourn someone you loved and lost. With sorrow, with beauty, and with the terrible knowledge that some things, once gone, don't come back.